This story starts around 7 years ago when I was a senior in high school. I joined the cross-country team in my senior year and I really loved the experience and the team camaraderie. The boys and girls teams trained together in the A groups and B groups. The A group was pretty much all boys and me, and I didn't mind this. It definitely pushed me to be a better runner, but it was really difficult to try and keep up with them, I must admit. Being in the A group, I grew close with a lot of the guys, and they all knew that I had a boyfriend. One guy, Joe, was really funny, and we got along great. We'd sit next to each other on the bus, do meets, and we'd text a lot, but I thought that we were just friends. After cross-country ended, the boys convinced me to do indoor track. And this is where Joe just got weird. In January, my relationship ended, and it was whatever. I mean, a high school relationship ending isn't the end of the world, right? But Joe started acting just strangely towards me. He got really mad if I didn't text him back. I went to a house party and drank, and he sent me this long text about how he was so disappointed in me and he thought that I was better than that. Our friendship started to get emotionally abusive. Joe kept on mentioning how I made him feel worthless, and he said things like, "I bet you wouldn't even care if I died," and he got jealous all the time and became just so controlling. I was already under school stress, so I decided to take a break from Joe. He didn't like this, obviously, and Joe started spreading rumors around school that I was hooking up with guys that had girlfriends, that I did sexually explicit things for weed, and just really awful things. Luckily, most people didn't believe him, but by the time outdoor track came around, our friendship was just completely over. I was really happy because the girls and boys track teams were two separate things, and girls distance had their own coach and their own practices and whatnot. So I saw Joe, but I never had to train or practice with him. He stopped calling and texting me, and that was a relief too, I must admit. But after track season ended and I was about to graduate, Joe sent me just a really long apology. He said that he didn't know he had feelings for me until my boyfriend and I broke up. He said that that's what triggered his weird behavior, and he was sorry for ruining our friendship. I accepted his apology and went on with my life, and we texted from time to time, but we absolutely were not close friends anymore. But it was the summer after my senior year that Joe started to make me really nervous. At least once a week at 1 and 2 in the morning, a car would drive down our street just blasting its horn. It became such an issue that the whole neighborhood was on watch for the mystery horn blaster. I started getting texts from Joe some nights saying things like, "Come out." I'd reply the next morning with just a question mark, and he'd say that he was drunk and just drunk texted. Now, I worked over the summer, so I was usually in bed by like 9 or 10ish, but one night I was up a little late. When I turned off my lights in my room, I immediately got a text from Joe that said, "Good night." This freaked me out a bit, and I told my parents everything that had happened, and they were obviously concerned too. My dad immediately thought Joe was the mystery honker, and I sent Joe a non-threatening text just saying that I worked long days, so I'm normally in bed early, so I'd appreciate not getting texted so late. I still got sporadic texts from Joe, but the mystery honking stopped, which was honestly great. In the fall, I actually went away to college. One weekend I came home and was up in my room, and I got a text from Joe at around midnight saying, "Welcome home." I freaked out and looked outside, but I didn't see a car. I asked how he knew I was home, and he said lots of people were home for the weekend, so he just assumed I was too. Joe then proceeded to favorite all of my tweets, around 2,000 mind you, and like all of my Instagram posts. I'd had enough at this point and blocked him literally everywhere, and I texted all of my friends and told them what happened, and to not mention me to Joe at all because he definitely was obsessed with me. Joe then called me and told me that he was going to end himself. I told my parents everything, and my dad got the police involved, and I didn't hear from Joe after this, until 2 summers later. It's important to note too that around this time, one of my brothers moved out. My mum wanted to turn my room into an office, so I moved rooms upstairs to his old room. My room now faced the back part of the house and not the street anymore. My dad works in the courts, and occasionally he has to do bail duty, where if someone gets arrested, he's the person that has to post bail. It really sucks because he can get a call at like 2 in the morning and have to go bail someone out. Now, on one particular night, my dad got a bail call at 2. He went downstairs and got water and saw the motion light in the backyard was on, which was weird. So he looked out of the kitchen window and saw a guy in our backyard looking up at my room. He ran outside and the guy jumped the fence and the police came and took statements, but it was in the middle of the night and my dad was pretty tired, so it could have been Joe, but the police couldn't prove it. And the next few months, I just felt on edge. I felt really unsafe in my own house, and how did Joe know that I moved rooms? How long would he watch me? It was nauseating, and my parents saw the toll that this was taking on me physically and emotionally. I was snapping at them over small things, and my hair was actually beginning to fall out, and I was losing weight. One day at breakfast, my dad walked into the kitchen and said, "I'm handling this Joe situation today. He won't bother you anymore." And after that, the incidents just stopped. Funnily enough too, a few years later, I actually ran into Joe at a party and he saw me and just turned white and left the party immediately. I have absolutely no clue what my dad did, but he made sure Joe never came around again. So, I never believed in paranormal activity, and my brother had never believed either. But then, he moved into my dad's for a few years after college. And one night, him and I were at the bar drinking, and he looked at me and said, "I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm pretty sure Dad's house is haunted. When he's out of town, I hear people talking around upstairs. I've woken up in bed hearing loud noises that get louder and louder, like they're coming at me, and I can't move until the noise stops." To be honest, I pretty much laughed it off and chalked it up to just night paralysis, since I experience it myself sometimes, and they're always accompanied by visual and audio hallucinations. Fast forward 5 to 6 years, and my dad asks me to house sit since he's going to be gone for 2 weeks, and it was going to be a vacation from my roommates for me, so I accept. I stay in my brother's old room since it got converted to the guest room. The first 4 or 5 days go by, and nothing weird happens. But then it rained one night, and I woke up and go upstairs, and the light by the landing for the door and the kitchen light are both on. I chalk it up to just being drunk the night before and just not turning them off. But that night, I'm in the basement playing some games, and I go upstairs to get a drink, come back down, and I noticed that a closet door was open that I didn't remember being opened. Again, I attributed it to just being cracked open, and when I opened the front door to check the mail, it was pulled open from suction, so I just shut it and made sure it was completely shut this time. Another couple of days go by with nothing, and then I'm laying in bed about to go to sleep when it sounds like someone was walking around above me. I figure it's just the house settling, but I keep hearing it, and it isn't the house settling, and it's definitely very distinct noises heading in a direction, stopping, and then heading back or in another direction. After a while, I pretty much accept that I think someone must have broken in, so I yelled up, and every time I did, that I was calling the police. It would stop moving, but then it would start back up again. I obviously hadn't called the cops because, well, I remembered what my brother had said, and the fact that it would only temporarily stop when I yelled up was weird. At this point, I decided to grab a baseball bat and I headed upstairs just in case. I turned on the lights and kept talking to the intruder. I searched every inch of the upstairs, and the way it's set up, there's no real way to go from room to room unnoticed. No hallways upstairs, just 3 rooms, 2 of which have wide openings to each other, then a bathroom and a bedroom in the corner. I searched for about an hour and then went back downstairs and shut off all the lights because I couldn't find anything, and about 10 minutes later, it started up again, and this time, it lasted about 30 minutes. And that night, I didn't get any sleep. A few more days go by with nothing, and then one night, I was in bed again, and I hear this really weird, faint, 8-bit sounding music, and it just starts slowly getting louder and louder, and at this point, I'm in full panic mode because of what my brother had said. But unlike him, I don't have paralysis, so I jump out of bed, grab my pillow and blanket, and go out to the couch in the living room. I didn't hear the sound once I left the room, and I stayed up watching the TV for a bit before falling asleep on the couch. It rained again that night, and when I woke up, the closet that was open before was wide open again, and the light above the front door landing was on again. Now, I was definitely sober that night, and I know that I hadn't opened the closet since there was no need for me to go into it. And I know for a fact that that light was off, because if it's on when you're watching TV in the basement, it just kind of blinds you. And after that, I just stayed on the couch. And no more instances besides one other night when it rained and the light was on again. When my dad came back, I asked him if he ever experienced anything weird in the house, and he said that he never had. I told him my story, and then he said he's always thought that there might be something, because no matter what time of year, there's always a fly or two in his house, and never any other type of bugs, which was a bit odd to him. But a couple of weeks after he came back, he called me after a rainstorm to say that the light above the landing was on when he woke up. And since then, he said that the only times that it happens is when it rains. And my brother, or I, had been at his house that week. I'm still not 100% a believer by any means, but that being said, I still get goosebumps every time I tell anyone about this, including typing this out. I must admit, though, that I'm a lot more open these days to believe weird things that people tell me that just seem unbelievable. So this story takes place near Fort Bragg, NC, where I went to college 4 years ago. Anyone who's familiar with the area knows that it has a large population of homeless vets near the base. Now, I just turned 20 years old and had moved out of the house for college over 2 hours away. I had previously worked at a nursing home for 2 years, so I have a special place in my heart for the struggling elderly. But my roommate and I, who was male, moved into a little apartment near the college and bought a rinky-dink washer and dryer set off Craigslist. Well, the washer didn't last a week until it went out, and we had to start using a laundromat. But my roommate was busy with homework, so I offered to do his laundry for him if he would do mine next week, and he agreed. So I grabbed a bag with laundry accessories, my phone, school books, about $15 in quarters, and our clothes in a dirty hamper, and I left. Now, the layout of the laundromat was, at the front of the store there were 2 rows of washers and then 2 rows of dryers near the back, then the dryers on the walls on the left-hand side near the front, and then there were 2 tables, a kitty corner to each other, one at the front left-hand side and one at the back right-hand side, and then the chairs lining the left of the walls. At the laundromat, I threw all of our laundry into a machine and pulled out one of my books for school to start studying. I was sitting at the table closest to the exit towards the front. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a woman with a child sitting down on the chairs to the left. I see an elderly man with a military hat standing in the middle aisle getting frustrated with the machine, and it was really hard to watch, and I felt obligated to help him. I grabbed my bag with all my laundry stuff to come to his aid and ask him if he would care for some help with the washer. He said yes, and I looked at his washer, and he had no soap and was missing a quarter in the slots. As I got closer, I could smell his very potent stench of body odor coming from his laundry. I offered him a Tide Pod and gave him a quarter, and he thanked me and then walked back over to the front tables. I picked up my book to start reading, and he catches the corner of my eye again, and he was taking all of his clothes off and putting them in the dryer, and he was now only in a white undershirt, tank top, and his shorts. At this point, I come to realize that this man's homeless and might have a few screws loose, so I should probably be careful. I watch him walk over to the other table near the back of the store and then walk towards my table with a big trash bag and sits down on the other side of the table. I smile at him and he smiles back, showing most of his teeth were missing and that his canines were very much decayed. He starts to small talk with me until there was an awkward silence. I could tell that he was really lonely and just wanted to talk, so yet again I just feel bad for him and I try and strike up a conversation. I ask him about his military hat, and he got a flash of pride in his eye and tells me that he was a veteran that fought in Vietnam and starts to tell me about all the things he used to do for the military, and when he was finishing telling me, I told him that my stepdad was a Korean vet, and I had a lot of respect for those who served and thanked him for his service. He asked me how my stepdad was, and I told him that he actually died of cancer when I was younger, but I loved him very much. And he looks me dead in the eye and tells me that he was sorry about my father, but I could call him Daddy at any time, and then puts his hat on me. At this point, I kind of started to freak out a bit, thinking that this man probably has lice, so I took it off relatively calmly and headed back to him. I wasn't sure if he was trying to be funny or not, but I told him that he was kind of making me a bit uncomfortable and I needed to be left alone anyway for my studies. He nodded and took his bag over to the other table. A few minutes passed and the lady and her kids that were sitting to the left leave, and just like clockwork, he comes over to sit with me again, and this time with his bag. He came over and apologizes to me and explained that he didn't mean to be rude and gave me a bag of candy. I try to decline, telling him that I have a dairy allergy. I actually do, but he refuses and puts it inside my bag of soaps. I say thank you and he nods and sits back down. I try to ignore him and he started to make these noises like he's in pain and to get my attention or something. Like he was having some sort of flare-up or something. I ask if he's okay, and he said, yes, I'm just getting old, and I kind of giggle at this, and then he tells me, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you, you have the most beautiful red hair I've ever seen. You remind me of my girlfriend. I ask him to hold on, and I switch my clothes over in the dryer. So I ask him about his girlfriend, and when I return, he tells me that she died of a heroin overdose 2 months ago. I tell him that I'm really sorry to hear that, and he then asks if I would be his girlfriend. And without a second thought, I then try and convince him that I'm underage and that would be highly inappropriate. I'm 4'11" and about 100 pounds, so I figured it would have been believable. But he then tells me that he doesn't care and can keep a secret, and then touches my hand that's on the table where he sat across from me. At this point, shivers went up my spine, and I told him that I'm sorry, sir, but no, I have a boyfriend, and pulled my hand away to text my roommate to come help me now. At this point, his gaze seems rather predatory and my heart begins to beat out of my chest. I put my book down inside my bag and I start gathering my things to just get the heck out of there. I'm trying to be slow enough not to alarm him or provoke unwanted behavior. I was wearing a tank top and sweatpants at the time, and he then comments that he can see my cleavage and they look like nice breasts and all sorts of other really depraved things. I stopped acknowledging him and threw my bag into the bottom of my hamper, started walking to the dryer where my clothes were, still sopping wet, and started shoveling them as fast as I could into the hamper. All during this time, he's telling me how he would take me to a hotel and do all these really horribly graphic things to me if he had the money, and that he had 60 years of experience in pleasuring women. I'm still trying to ignore him and have almost gotten all of my clothes. And then he either picks up underwear that had fallen onto the floor in my scramble or had taken them from the hamper whilst I wasn't paying attention. The bright blue thong catches my eye and then I look at him. I look at him dead in the eye as he flicks his tongue through the space of his missing front teeth like a snake. He starts bringing up my underwear to his face, which I snatch so fast that it startles him. He starts hightailing it to his bag to the back of the mat, and I panic at this point and head to the door with all my belongings. I've honestly never seen an old man run so fast. He grabs his bag and runs toward me, asking for a ride to a nearby town if I wait for him. He grabs my shoulder in my struggle to open the door, and then I scream loud, and I have some pipes on me, and he freezes. I make it out of the door and then to my car without hearing him behind me, and my guess was that he was looking around the parking lot and the laundromat, making sure that no one was around, and I'm not sure I wasn't paying attention. I threw my laundry into the back seat and then he starts walking out to my car. He arrives at it just as I was getting in and locking my doors, asking for a ride again and pulling on my door handles, begging and crying. I leave having a total panic attack and I get home and wake up my roommate and just start bawling my eyes out, and I tell him everything that happened and made him promise me that he would go with me next time. I'm not sure why I didn't just leave with the laundry and then come back with my roommate in the first place. I'm not sure why I did a lot of those things that led to it. I guess it's hard to have a clear head in stressful situations, right? All I know is that I'm glad that I made it out when I did, because the whole situation was just going downhill quickly. So about 2 years ago, my family and I stayed in a hotel in this city called Isfahan in Iran. We got 2 rooms in this hotel. Don't remember the name, but we have pictures. One room was for my aunt and uncle on a different floor, and another was for my mum, dad, sister, and me. My mum and dad had a room that had a door access from the bathroom, and my sister and I had two twin beds. That was sort of in a bigger open living room type space, but we could still see the bathroom from where we slept. That night, I was reading on my Kindle and the lights were off, and suddenly I had this paralyzing fear that if I put my Kindle down, someone's face would be right there staring at me. It was completely dark, and I assumed my sister was asleep because I heard nothing from her, but I just couldn't put my Kindle down because I was frozen with fear. I couldn't even change the page, so I just kept rereading the same thing over and over again, and all of a sudden I heard a smack sound against the wall, and I jumped, threw my Kindle on the ground, and hid under the blankets until I eventually saw my mum get up and go to the bathroom, and the thought that someone was awake calmed me down a bit. I still couldn't sleep because, well, I was still on edge, and I later saw my mum go to the bathroom like 3 times, and in my head I thought that she ate some bad food or something. In the morning, my parents asked us how we slept, and I told them what had happened. I mentioned to my mum, you didn't sleep too much too, and I kept seeing you go to the bathroom, and my mother looked at me and goes, I didn't go to the bathroom, you did. I was surprised, and so was my sister, who also believed it was my mother who was in the bathroom, but she said that she also couldn't sleep and thought that she saw my mum go. My dad chimed in and said that he thought it was also me too. In other words, we all saw someone go to the bathroom like 3 or 4 times during the night, and it had a womanly shape. We were all shocked and decided that we shouldn't tell my aunt and uncle about what we saw because they probably would think that we're crazy or something. We meet up with them for breakfast and ask how their night was, to which my aunt said, I woke up and there were 3 women staring at me, and they were all mad. So I want to start off by saying that I don't actually believe in ghosts myself. I grew up very superstitious, but once I grew into adulthood, I didn't think paranormal explanations made any sense, and I'm still agnostic to the existence of spirits. Still though, paranormal encounter stories really excite me, and I love hearing them and suspending my disbelief. Anyways, when I was younger, I had a great aunt who was psychic. Not the typical kind that reads your future or anything. She was a staunch Catholic and basically just knew stuff that she had no way of knowing. She always saw it as a gift from God or something. To give an example, one time my mum was pregnant with my older sister. She experienced some bleeding and went to the hospital. Only her and my dad knew that she was there, but not long after, she received a call from her aunt asking, well, what's wrong with the baby? There are more examples, but this is the only one I can remember off the top of my head. Her daughters, my mum's cousins, thought that they had a bit of that gift too, though not as prominent, obviously. These relatives lived up in the Adirondacks, and every year during the summer, we used to visit them. I guess when I was around 3, we planned another trip up, but one morning about a week before the trip, my mum woke up, opened her eyes, and for a split second, saw a white figure at the foot of her bed. She thought it was really weird, but said nothing, until it happened again and again, every day for a week. Finally, she told my dad, who froze and said, I've been seeing that too. Weirded out, they continued with the trip as planned, and during a night around a campfire, they told my mum's cousin about it, and her immediate response was, watch your children. Someone's telling you to watch your children. And that obviously really spooked them, but they didn't know what to make of it. Sometime into the trip, we as a family went to the cemetery where my mum's mum was buried to visit graves and whatnot, and I don't remember any of this, but from what I'm told, I stood with my dad, who was a little ways away from my mum and sister. He was busy with something, and I asked where mum was. Over that hill, he told tiny toddler me and pointed to a small hill in the cemetery. I saw the bigger hill the road followed, and eventually my mum and dad met up again, both asking where I was. Panic set in, and my mum suddenly remembered the fireside convo with her cousin. They didn't watch me, and I went missing in the Adirondacks. And they still haven't found me to this day. I'm joking. After a lot of panicking and searching, they obviously found me sitting outside a gas station up the road, crying my little eyes out. But I guess the moral of this story is that if you see spooky white figures in your room, don't let your toddlers wonder about graveyards in the mountains, or something like that. Honestly though, there's some big animals and weird people up there, so I was pretty lucky. Or maybe luck had nothing to do with it. So at the time of this story, I'd just turned 17 and was still pretty naive. I live in England, so it's legal to work in a bar and serve alcohol supervised, but not to drink alcohol. Not that that stopped me anyway. And I worked in a working's men's club filled with middle-aged elderly people, and most were pretty nice. I sold bingo tickets twice a week for my dad's cousin, and I was pretty good at it. It's not typical to get tips here, but I earned more in tips than I did in my actual wage. On a Saturday, my dad would come with me to have a drink with my elder sister while they played competitive darts in the main bar overlooking my booth. This one particular night, there was a middle-aged, average-looking guy, a little on the plump side, but generally unnoticeable. And on the first round of selling tickets, he was at the fruit machine opposite the entire time, looking over at me occasionally. During the second round, he approached me, asked what I was selling and how bingo worked, etc. Clearly had never played before, but hey, everyone starts somewhere, right? He bought some tickets and offered to buy me a drink, and I declined and informed him that I was underage. By now, I had a bit of an uneasy vibe and didn't want to take a drink from a guy that I didn't know. He then offered a cola, complimenting me a little too hard. Again, I declined and went on my way to help with the game in the main hall, part of my job. The third time, he stood against the wall adjacent to me and just watched me work. He waited until the queue calmed down and bragged about how much money he had and how he wants to be my sugar daddy, how cute I am, commenting on my figure and my boobs and my butt and all that sort of stuff. And I was trapped in my booth and I was late into the main hall, so the concert chairman, the guy who calls out the bingo numbers and gives out winnings, comes out and asked what was going on. This guy claims that we're just talking. I apologized to the chairman and he walked into the hall, said that he could see that I was freaked out, so I told him everything. He made the bar staff aware, who also made my boss, my dad's cousin, aware also. Last round of selling tickets, and he doesn't even wait for me to get back into my booth. He just grabs my ass, telling me how he wants to be my sugar daddy once again, tries to push me against the wall and is suddenly spun around. Not just by my dad, but by my boss and numerous staff members and customers who heard and saw what went down. He started arguing his innocence until my dad not so politely introduced himself. And at that point, he knew that he was screwed. My dad punched him in the nose, blood running down his face. Everyone picked him up, a plank of wood, and just threw him out of the closed door. And I never saw him after that. Everyone checked up on me to make sure I was okay. My sister covered the rest of my shift, and I was bought so many drinks that I had a free bar tab for 2 months after that. I'm really thankful to my dad and all the other guys in that place for keeping an eye on me. I work as a waitress at a restaurant, and it's normal for me to get a few creeps being creepy towards me because, well, I have pretty big breasts and my designed to be loose work shirt is still tight across my chest, so it's very obvious that they're pretty big. I'm pretty much used to the attention by now, and all of the catcalls and such are just part of the background noise to me at this point. But last week, there was this guy who I was serving, probably mid-20s, somewhat good-looking, probably used to getting girls with little to no effort. And anyway, he told me that he would be leaving the best tip of my life. I got excited because I was thinking he was going to leave like $50 or $100 or something. Yeah, I have bills to pay. But instead of leaving me a cash tip, he left his phone number and a note to call him for the best night of my life. Obviously, I was a bit disappointed to have been stiffed like that, but I threw away the note and just forgot about the whole thing. Until yesterday. He came in again and sat in my section. When I went to take his order, he asked if I'd gotten his note. I lied and said that the busser must have thrown it away or something. He saw past my lie, though, and told me that I should really be ashamed of myself for disrespecting him like that. I told him that I have a fiancé, but I may as well have told him that I have a pet rock because he said, "I'm getting that date with you." I asked one of my co-workers if he'd take the table instead, and he understood and took it. But that wasn't the end of it. I take the bus home, and that customer just happened to be taking the same bus. This made me uncomfortable, and I texted my fiancé, and he met me at the bus stop. And sure enough, the creep got off at my stop. He tried acting like he and I were friends, but my fiancé put his arm around me and politely asked him to leave. The creep said, "You think you can be a real man to her?" He was obviously trying to challenge my fiancé, but luckily he's smarter than that and just said, "Leave me alone and have a good day," before turning us around and walking to our apartment. That was yesterday evening, and luckily nothing has happened since, but my manager said that if he gives me any more trouble to let her know and she'll deal with it. Of all the creeps I've come across in all my years of being a waitress, this is the first time that I've been truly weirded out. Hopefully last night's encounter was the end of it, but I guess I'll just have to wait and see. When I was young, I lived in a house in California, a 3-bedroom building with a common identical layout to the other homes in the neighborhood, and it was haunted by just many different things. In fact, I have recently taken up chronicling my early experiences in that house. Now, at the end of our hallway, we had a large old heater with a pilot light that you had to ignite very carefully, and next to that was the light switch for the hallway. Every night before bed, I would have to brush my teeth, which meant turning on the light at the end of the hallway. And before bed every night, something was always waiting for me underneath that light switch. It was a squatting male-looking figure standing menacingly at the end of the hallway. Its head would always face backwards, though the neck didn't look twisted or broken or anything. It wore dirty-looking overalls, a crushed straw farmer's hat, muddy boots, and a red flannel shirt. It held what looked like some kind of farming tool, and the smile on its lips and the thing made it just look hungry, if that makes sense. But it just kind of stood there watching me like it was waiting for me to make my move. Gathering all the courage that I could muster, I would always close my eyes tight, run to the end of the hallway and throw on the light switch. I would always expect to open my eyes to see it standing right in front of me, but it was like it just would vanish once the light was turned on. But the area where it once stood just always felt really cold, and lingering in the air was this scent of rotted vegetables or something, like old lettuce or cabbage. I'm curious if this description matches anyone else's experiences. Have you seen anything like this, and if so, where? Let me just start by saying that my cousins live in an extremely old Victorian terrace house with a large cellar and 3 floors above that, and there are 3 cousins that live there. The oldest, Jade, middle child, Laura, and the youngest by about 10 years, Theo. When all 3 of them lived there always seemed to be something unusual happening. The 2 bedrooms on the top floor, basically in the attic, belonged to the 2 older girls who were teenagers, while Theo had a small bedroom on the middle floor next to his parents' room when he was little. Some of the more tame things that went on included books flying off shelves in the cellar and CDs doing the same out of the cabinet in the living room, but as the girls got older, things became just even more strange. My aunt and cousins would fill me and my brother in whenever we saw them, and as an older kid or young teen, I was honestly excited, if not a little spooked, to see it. For example, Jade allowed Theo, which he was only a toddler, to sleep over with her in her room on the top floor one night, and she woke up to hear him talking. When she asked why he was talking, he said that he was talking to the little boy over there. This boy appeared a number of times, for example when he was up in Jade's room playing by himself, and my uncle heard him laughing and went up, only for Theo to point out that he was playing and laughing with a little boy. Things did happen to Laura too, but not as much. I think the only time she ever experienced anything was when she was in her late teens, came home drunk, took a selfie in her dark room at night before she fell asleep, only to look at it in the morning and see that there was something that resembled a face in the picture. I've seen the picture myself, and even though it could technically be something else, there's definitely something in the background, and it's pretty creepy. Also, one of Laura's friends once claimed to have seen something when sleeping over. That being said though, most of the things did happen to poor Jade and Theo. And there are only two main other things that I can think of that happened to be the most scary too. One of them was when Theo was getting his hair cut by his dad in the cellar, which, by the way, the family dog refused to go down into for some reason, and asked my uncle, "Who's that man behind you?" My uncle looked, but apparently saw nothing. One of the other big things was when Jade and Theo were playing in the hallway on the middle floor, and they both said that they saw something, a light or a shadow or something, they're not quite sure, come past them after coming from the top floor staircase. Immediately, Theo started crying because he was actually scared this time. All of this seemed to be centered around Jane though, and funnily enough, when she moved out and went to university, everything just stopped. And I mean everything. She hasn't lived in that house since, and there's not been a single incident. Of course, me and my brother conducted multiple ghost hunts in the cellar and the attic when we were kids, but we never found anything. The only reason why I thought of this story today is because, well, I was actually speaking to Theo, who is now 13. After both his sisters moved out, he moved into Jade's bedroom a few years ago because it was the biggest. However, now that he's moved back down to the middle floor to his old small bedroom, apparently because the wind was too loud up there or something, but according to his parents, they think he was a little creeped out by it. I mean, I think I would be too. I just hope this isn't the start of another round of whatever was wrong with that house, even though it made for some pretty interesting stories, I must admit. Even when we go around these days, I always find myself being extra speedy whenever I have to go upstairs to use the bathroom. All in all, I'm just glad nothing happened on the few occasions I used to sleep over there myself, but it was always interesting but creepy hearing the stories. So, the weirdest thing has happened to me, and honestly, I don't know what I saw. It's around 4:30 a.m. here, and all the dogs in my neighborhood are just freaking out. I get up to go let my dogs inside the house, figuring that that'll at least calm things down a bit, and I open the back porch door and look to my right where there's a fence line to another house, and I looked over there because it looked like there were clothes hanging off the fence, and our neighbors have never done that, so I thought it was weird, but then I saw them. There were two men in black suits, but I swear to you that they didn't have any head. I look at them for a good minute to make sure my eyes just aren't playing tricks on me, and they don't move, and they just kind of stand there. And I mean, they were completely still, almost as if they were in still frame or something. I could tell that one looked heavier than the other, but that was it. And well, I just backed into the house and locked the back door and turned off the light. I go back into my room, and my husband is now awake because of all the dogs barking, and I tell him that I'm going to wait until it's light outside to get the dogs in because I just saw something that I cannot explain. I told him what I saw, and I said that I feel like I sound crazy, but I know that I saw it. He seemed like he believed me, but I don't know. I know it all sounds crazy, but I swear to you, I saw them.